In my original graphics and gaming video, many of you seem to agree with some of the points I was trying to make. A handful of people didn't agree and couldn't get behind some of what I was trying to say. A huge topic of discussion in that video was because I mentioned Batman Arkham Knight as a game I would throw into this category. I'm not backing down from that. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna double down. Another point I was trying to make is that games, either from an artistic standpoint or a technical standpoint, would not only come out and look amazing, but also run amazing without many issues in previous generations. Developers just used to put more care into the product and didn't rely on, 25 to 50 gig patches 6 months to a year after a game launches to give us what we really should have had in the first place. I am not saying that this is the case with all developers and games in the industry today. Some games are very, very polished. And I'm not even saying that patches and updates themselves aren't welcome. But things have got a whole lot worse than they were before. I can admit that Batman Arkham Knight, for example, did not launch in the state that I finally played it in. Many of you played it when it was a broken mess on console, and especially the PC version. We know that the PC version was awful. It was terrible. But years after release, Arkham Knight runs and looks absolutely amazing. I can understand why people don't want me to use Arkham Knight as a great example of a game that still runs and looks amazing. You've got 50% of the people that are disagreeing with that because the game launched in a terrible state, which sort of defeated the purpose of some of what I was saying in that video. And the other 50% somehow just don't feel that the game still holds up or looks amazing at all. I understand. I get it. A game that can look that good and put many of your favorites to shame likely stings just a little. Since so many of you didn't like that choice, I'm coming out swinging in this video, and even more games that still look amazing and put much of the latest stuff to shame. So just like the original video, I have chose these games based on how well they stack up against today's games in the aforementioned categories. That's right, just as in the first video, I believe these games hold up and compete with a lot of today's best. Some of the console versions too, but specifically if we're talking the PC release of some of these titles. When Gears of War 4 released back in 2016, it was the only title Microsoft had at that time that could compete with the other big dogs of the industry. It was the opposite of the previous generation where everyone asked Sony when they would have something in response to Gears of War on Xbox 360. The answer for that would come a year later with Uncharted Drake's Fortune. And how times have changed. When Uncharted 4 came out, there wasn't much on Xbox One that was in the same conversation. Fast forward a little bit to later in that same year, and Gears of War 4 put the world on notice. Unreal Engine 4 was here, and the Coalition made it do things that just about nobody else was doing. The leap from the previous Gears games was immediately noticeable. The jump in textures, lighting, particle density, it was immediately evident. Anyone could see that this was the generational leap everyone had been waiting for in the next Gears of War title, and especially on Xbox. And to top it all off, there was an exceptional PC release of this game. And there still aren't really a lot of games, Unreal Engine or otherwise, that have the amount of menu tweaks that Gears of War 4 has. This game isn't just one of the best looking games ever that puts a lot of the more recent stuff to shame, it's also one of the most optimized. I'm taking nothing away from the Xbox One X version and certainly not the Series X version that was later updated, but the PC version stands alone. Playing up to 120 FPS is pretty amazing, I'll say, but playing at 240 or more consistently is, well, it's awesome. I love their benchmarking tool. The benchmarking tool is super well done and allows even newcomers to understand what they're being limited by. It's like a whole other level of just details in this game. It puts all the other Gears stuff to shame, in my opinion. And this is coming from someone that thinks that Gears of War 3 still looks really good. I thought about using that game for this video. We may have to use it in a future video, who knows? I couldn't get over just, that orange goo that would splatter on the suit or the rain dripping off your armor. And honestly, the only thing that I can fault the last couple of Gears titles for is some of the characters and their development. A lot of these characters to me in the newer Gears games, they're just not as interesting. And I also don't like killing mechanical enemy types. But that's where my beef with these stop. Other than that, they're awesome. Gears games have always tried to one-up the last game in graphics with each new release. Gears of War 4 is no different, and even though I'm more disappointed with Gears of War 5, you could say the same thing. You could say similar things. You won't be disappointed if you've never played these games. Listen, man, Resident Evil 7 is great, and I could have easily thrown that game into this video. But it's the Resident Evil 2 remake that truly made this engine special for me. Capcom took a lot of the stuff that they learned from Resident Evil 7 and carried that knowledge over to this remake. Resident Evil 2 Remake may be my favorite choice, possibly, in this entire video, and maybe even the first one for that matter. This game really had it all. It looked great, it ran at 60 FPS on the consoles, base PS4 and Xbox One. It's super well optimized and even scales well on PC. Capcom really takes their time with this stuff and they love their characters, and they're one of the few that I'd say compete with the best character models in the industry. So, for example, I always liked what Rockstar and Naughty Dog do with their characters and the level of detail that they have. But this engine has taken these classic Resident Evil characters and turned the detail dial all the way up. This engine made a true generational leap in the same generation, and Capcom spent a lot of time trying to perfect this technology. If you enjoy survival horror games or even lean more to the action side, then RE2 Remake should not be missed. It runs on some of the best technology in the industry today. It's 60 FPS or higher and even better on the new consoles, PS5 and Xbox Series X. But remember what this took to run at 60 FPS on PC. Remember that this ran at 60 FPS on base PS4 and Xbox One. If there was one small little knock on the PC release of this game, and they've had a ton of time to update it, I wish there would have been a little bit more things to tweak in the menus. There was also like a ray tracing update at one point, and it was just, it's okay. It's not amazing. No DLSS is a little bit of a bummer as well, considering when the update came out. But it's great. It's great in motion, like body parts bleed and dismember as you'd expect. Those headshots, when those headshots pop, they turn into this jelly or like this mush. It just looks really cool. It's just really impressive stuff, and it can depend on a lot of times what you're shooting with and how you're shooting. And let me make this clear, because I have played a tiny bit of the game. I'm not saying that stuff like the Silent Hill 2 remake looks poor by comparison, but I also haven't really played enough of it to know for sure, but it does look really good. What I am saying is that the Resident Evil 2 remake is another great example of why in-house engines are very important. Unreal Engine is cool, especially some of the older Unreal Engine stuff. It's cool in the right hands. But me personally, I'm almost always more impressed with developers that use their own technology to power their games. Bioshock Infinite has got to be one of the best games I've ever played. A lot of the games that I've chose are some of the best games that I've ever played. That's also another reason why I picked them. But Bioshock Infinite, it performed great on release. It's one of those games that didn't have a lot of problems at launch. I can't remember my exact setup at the time, but I do remember still being on my 570 and possibly still using my 2600K. I couldn't run it maxed out, but I could run it mostly maxed out at around 70 FPS, and that was everything to me back in 2013. 360 and PS3 did run this at 30 FPS, if I'm not mistaken, but it was still impressive for a game like this to come out, at the end of a generation, such a nice looking game running on those specific consoles. That was a great year for video games, period. You had other impressive stuff like The Last of Us and GTA 5, but gone were the days of that dark and gritty look of the first two Bioshock games. They changed everything, and the art style was one of the most noticeable things right out of the gate. Infinite just has a lot more happening on screen, and there's a lot more color to most of the environments by comparison. And I'm not hating at all, because I love the first two Bioshock games too, and I almost use one of those instead of Infinite. For me, it's undeniable how well this game still stacks up against some of the more recent games. I still can't get over just even the opening moments alone. If we just factor in like the first 30 minutes to an hour of this game, the rain pouring down, those drops of water on Booker's hand, and just the surrounding ocean, those waves crashing up against the rocks next to the lighthouse. This Bioshock was coming at the end of a generation, and they pulled out any and all stops that Unreal Engine 3 would allow for. I'll remind some of you that this is the same engine that powered many of the games in the original video. You see what I mean? We didn't need all these new engines and forced ray tracing. Some of these games still look beautiful and run great. I would take games that look like a lot of the stuff that I've chose for these videos. I would take games that look like this forever. If we could just get better writing, better stories in games, and we can improve things like physics, that would be enough for me. I really, I feel like video games and the visuals that we have, we're in a really good spot. I'm just still really impressed with this game. The lighting and water effects, all that stuff in particular, it looks really good. You know, Elizabeth still being one of the best character models ever created for a video game. When you come out of that chair at the beginning, you know, as Booker, to the untrained eye and someone who doesn't know any better, those reflections are top notch considering the age. If I had never played Bioshock Infinite before and someone tried to convince me, you know, at their house or something, hey, check this game out, an indie studio made this game in 4 or 5 years and it even has ray tracing, I would believe them. It's actually kind of insane how I can push this game to run as fast as it does now. 400 FPS, 500 FPS, it's madness. My monitor's only 240 hertz, so I'm left wondering, what does all of this look like for those lucky enough to have over, 480 hertz, 500 hertz? I can highly recommend Bioshock Infinite. It's one of the best games I've ever played, even if it's just to see one of the best looking games from the 360 and PS3 generation. I almost broke this game out for the original video. God of War 2018 stands alone in the previous generation, especially when we're talking about first-party Sony PlayStation titles. And trust me when I tell you, they have a lot to choose from for these type of videos. I wasn't going to do it. I put Batman Arkham Knight in there, but my hand felt a little bit forced. I'm like, okay, they want the big guns. I'm bringing the big guns. Again, some of these titles are from the same generation, and God of War is right there in the mix. I personally wouldn't put God of War over something like Arkham Knight, but I take nothing away from what Sony Santa Monica did here. When I tell you that this game is just about as perfect as you can get in any direction, art direction, technical direction, gameplay is solid. Do you guys remember when God of War 2018 was first revealed? You get caught up in the moment, but some of us were like, man, Uncharted 4 who? Lost Legacy what? Gears what? Some of you may even think that Ragnarok looks better. But I would argue that 2018 on base PS4 made an even bigger leap from God of War 3 on PlayStation 3. It also just had a way larger impact than Ragnarok did. And I know some of you still remember how great God of War 3 looks. If we're talking about like a pure fixed camera hack and slash game, God of War 3 holds up, and I really wish there was a PC version of that game. How many games have come out in the current generation that would stand head and shoulders above God of War 2018 on a technical level, any level? I'm not saying that there aren't a small handful, but please, in the comments section, name them. There are not a lot of games in the current generation PS5, Xbox Series X that you can say really stand head and shoulders above this game. And I like Uncharted 4 a lot. I used it for the last video. But God of War 2018 was like a different level of, I can't believe they've done this. It also got a lot of praise at the time, and it deserved some of the praise for being one of the few games that didn't have any camera cuts. It wasn't the first, but it doesn't make it any less impressive given the development time and insane visual fidelity on display here. And again, this is one of those games where the example of the leap from one generation to the next it's undeniable. Few games make this kind of a technical leap and have what I would call perfect art direction to bring it all together. But come on, man, we got bearded Kratos, Atreus looks amazing, everything about this game looks amazing. All the little details and the environments and crazy good set pieces. That first fight with the stranger probably meant even more to those of us that had played some of the previous games. But that moment in the game, even though it's short-lived, was amazing for everyone. And the fact that it happened so early in the game, you're like, I don't know, like, how are they going to top this? Like, is this game going to get better somehow? I had a similar feeling with God of War 3 and playing that for the first time. Like, what the hell? Like, you open up, you're immediately fighting Poseidon, and you just don't know how they're going to be able to top this. Like, if this is the beginning of the game, like, what do they have in store for us for the rest of the game? How was it all done in God of War 2018? I don't know. I'm not sure, because I don't develop games, but I know it's really awesome. And few games from the PS5, Xbox Series X generation can be mentioned in the same breath. There's also a really great PC version now. It cleans up a lot of the blurriness of the PS4 and the PS4 Pro versions. Being able to use things like DLSS, and especially now with DLSS 4, those things transform so many games. God of War 2018, it's technically amazing, or artistically amazing, and it's a game where it's bittersweet to know that I'll never be able to experience it again for the first time. The next game is sort of a one-off for this video and more of an honorable mention than a game that truly competes visually a generation or two later. It's very near and dear to me, and it's one of those games I know like the back of my hand. The new Dead Space remake is a very visually pleasing game. It is. It does a lot of things the original Dead Space and Dead Space 2 just can't do, as one or two people decided that they were going to point out to me in the comment section of that video. That being said, what is the point of all those sweet new visuals if it runs like trash? The console version of the Dead Space remake runs great and doesn't suffer a significant amount of stuttering and performance problems. Nowhere near the same as the PC release. The console version's biggest problem for the Dead Space remake is image quality. Depending on where you're at and what's happening on screen, it's horrendous. I am on a 9800X3D and a 5070 Ti. And while this machine runs the Dead Space remake better than my 10700K and 4070 Super build, it's still far from perfect. PCs like these should eat a game like the Dead Space remake for breakfast. But unfortunately, the performance for a good chunk of this experience is unacceptable. I say that because there are far more impressive games and equally as impressive games that require less and run a lot better. Guys, some of these titles, just to name a couple of GPUs, run on stuff like a GTX 1060, a GTX 970, and even weaker cards than that. And they had really good performance at the time, 1080p, 1440p, 60 FPS, 70 FPS. I think the recommended settings for something like Red Dead Redemption 2 is like a GTX 1060. Now, obviously, you're not going to max out Red Dead Redemption 2 on a 1060 at 4K with all the settings turned up. But my point still stands when you look at the Dead Space remake and you look at the other Dead Space games, it's like, yeah, it looks better, but is it worth it? And the other games still look amazing, so what the hell? Worst of all, Motive abandoned this game. I think they had maybe 1-2 patches and then just nothing. Two problems the other three games never had: image quality and performance were always amazing on these titles. It's not even a matter of, we can brute force things now. Like, these games always looked and ran amazing. They did. Dead Space 2 in particular looked amazing in the same generation and made a huge leap over the original. I like to compare it to the Uncharted 1 to Uncharted 2 situation in this case. The leap in visuals from the first game to Dead Space 2 is that big. Of course, it doesn't hold up as well as some of the other games I've used in these videos, but it serves well for one of my major talking points. Dead Space 2 came out and put a lot of other games at the time to shame visually, at least for me. And I was hitting around 90 FPS or more on a 2600K GTX 570. It may have even been a 770 at that time. You see how far I'm taking you guys back? You see the points that I'm trying to make? The Dead Space remake does look nice, but it's not as nice as some of the other games I mentioned, and it requires a lot more power. Dead Space 2 still looks incredible, runs great, and a lot faster than so many other games I could name, the remake included. It's also a shame that developers don't see that sometimes less is more. Simple, very simple is often a good thing, and I stand by that. I was going to save Doom Eternal for a possible third act in these we didn't know how good we had it videos. Why wait though? Doom Eternal is the video game. I could have used Doom 2016 and still would have been able to make my points. But why not use the bigger gun, right? That bigger gun is Doom Eternal. There's been a lot of great sequels that have made significant leaps in the same generation, but I don't know if many have accomplished what Eternal did. Both Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal run on those base consoles of that generation at 60 FPS and look amazing. Let's start with that, because you have incredible visuals with little compromise. It's something that we can't say about a lot of other games if we just stick to even the console side of things for a moment. Uncharted 4, amazing game, looks incredible, does a lot of awesome things, a lot of attention to detail, locked at 30 FPS on PS4. God of War 2018, in my opinion in some ways, looks even better than that, locked at 30 FPS on PS4. Gears 4, 30 FPS on Xbox One, awesome looking game. These latest Doom games came along and they were like, hey, we have this awesome tech here at id and we've hired actual wizards to make our games. We can make incredible looking games, have them perform at 60 FPS on these extremely dated pieces of hardware. These games run and look as good as they do on those consoles. And even if we switch it over to PC, you don't need some like crazy, insane, beefy rig to take it beyond that console experience. You don't even have to like Doom games, first-person shooters at all, to appreciate and respect the work that went into these titles. I would absolutely put Doom Eternal up against this generation's best in any category. Alright, so maybe not the ray tracing that they added later. It doesn't really compete with something like Alan Wake, for example. But the ray tracing that they did add, if you're running on a pretty decent machine, you're not hurting performance much at all by adding ray tracing to your experience in this game. Do you need it? I mean, do you absolutely need it in a game like Doom? Like, how often do you find yourself stopping to look at reflections and things like that in a Doom game? I mean, probably not very often, so I'll say no, even though turning it on for myself at 1440p, I mean, why not? And then if we flip this whole thing, you can look no further than Doom the Dark Ages to get what may be the best example I can give in all of this. Forced ray tracing, especially in a game like Doom, you know, I don't agree that it was the best move. I understand why it has to happen, I understand that ray tracing is here to stay, and I understand the benefits. I also understand with the current version of id Tech that it's just built into the engine. I'm sure it's great, and having that built into your engine, you know, helps a lot if you're a games developer. But there's no denying that Doom the Dark Ages took a lot of performance off the table with the forced ray tracing and hurt both the console and the PC experience. And yet, you still have to give id a ton of credit. Even with the forced ray tracing, they still managed to get another one of these Doom games running at 60 FPS on the consoles. They deserve a lot of credit for that, they do. I have a lot of respect for id Software, and until they give us another disaster like Rage, I'll continue praising their work. A lot like the original video, some of you may not agree that these titles hold up well today. You might even try to explain why this game and that game appear dated by comparison. I mean, let's look at Stalker 2 as I close out this video. Stalker 2 is like a really great example. Just look at the requirements for that game, Stalker 2, and then compare that game, how it looks, its requirements to something like Metro Exodus. I'm here to tell you guys, I don't see it. I don't know how you can even compare a game like Stalker 2 to Metro Exodus. The requirements just don't justify what I'm seeing on screen for a lot of these latest games. Even if we can't agree that some of these games look better than a lot of the stuff that's been released over the last several years, I do think many of us can agree on one thing. The titles you think look better don't look a generation better and somehow still perform a whole lot worse by comparison. And if some of these games are the standards that we must now live by, then I have to disagree, and I feel like we're moving backward by doing so. It's any number of reasons that you could name as to why some of this stuff is happening. Lazy, poor budgeting, poor hiring process, and some of the standards set by the development teams of today. It still won't change the fact that sometimes having that little bit of extra that we think is just better isn't worth the cost of the performance you lose on top of sacrificing image quality in a lot of cases. It's not just brute force on the latest hardware. A lot of what I've shown has always been well optimized and ran very well on day one. Listen, I still have a handful of games in the back pocket. I've been saving a much older game that artistically leaves so many games of today in the dust. I think I've made my point though, and I've made it more than once now. The games of today in the current generation aren't making the same leaps, and those that do often hurt the experience because of loss of performance. There are exceptions, of course. As with everything, you can go and check out my latest videos where I praise the release of Stellar Blade, both on console and PC. Like, that is a very well-made game. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. These are a lot of fun, and I look forward to reading your comments. You guys take care. Have a good one. Peace.